Hi, I'm Francis. I thought growing old meant slowing down, gardening, grandkids, Sunday dinners, but instead, it meant watching my daughter marry a man who smiled at me while stealing everything I'd built. He called me senile, said I'd done enough. Then he cracked open my safe at night, thinking no one would know. But the camera saw everything. I wake up before the sun most days. Habit, I guess. 40 years of setting the alarm at 5:45 doesn't leave your system just because no one needs you to clock in anymore. These days, the coffee brews slower, the garden grows wilder, and the house creaks louder. Still, it's mine. Every inch of it paid for, patched up, and held together by calloused hands and stubborn pride. There's peace in the routine. Coffee in my weathered mug. A quiet seat on the porch where the squirrels seem to recognize me more than my own daughter does. Sometimes I talk to them just to hear my own voice. Evelyn and Braxton drop by, but only when they need something, or when it's just convenient enough to feel like a visit. I don't say it out loud, but I know. I feel it. You spend your whole life building a home in this country, and somehow you still end up feeling like a guest once you're old. Funny how that works. This morning's different. Quiet still, sure, but the kind that hums with something beneath it. I can't place it, but I know that feeling, like a pressure drop before a storm. You don't see it, but your bones do. Evelyn called the other day, said they wanted to have me over for dinner. First time in months. I told her I'd bring a bottle of that red she used to sneak sips from when she was 16. She laughed, but it didn't reach her voice. I arrived early like I always do. I rang the doorbell and waited, holding that bottle like it meant something. Braxton answered, too loud, too friendly. Evelyn hugged me like a polite stranger. The dinner was decent. Lasagna, garlic bread, some salad no one touched. But the air was all wrong. Stage smiles, small talk about the weather, how the neighborhood's changing, the usual filler. I've sat through insurance depositions with more sincerity. Then Braxton brings up future investments. Real estate, passive income, leveraging assets. Words people use when they're about to ask for something they don't deserve. He mentioned my house, didn't say it like I still lived there, said it like it was on a spreadsheet somewhere. He didn't look at me when he said it. I kept quiet. Old men learn to wait. Wait and listen. You can learn more from what people don't say than what they do. Later, Evelyn brought out dessert, store-bought cake, which was its own kind of message. While slicing it, she casually said, "Dad, we've been thinking, maybe we could help you streamline your bills just to take some pressure off. If you want, we could manage your online accounts, simplify things." I smiled, told her I appreciated the offer, said I'd think about it. We moved on, talked about the neighbor's new dog, the school down the block, gas prices, all things that don't matter when you're trying to distract someone. But inside, I made a note. No one ever wants to simplify your life unless they plan to own it. That night, back home, I opened my laptop, checked my bank, my utilities, my retirement accounts. Everything looked fine, but I didn't feel fine. I set up new alerts, quietly, no announcements, just a flick of the wrist and a few extra passwords. The air had shifted, and I'd lived long enough to know not to ignore it. Next morning, I drove down to the hardware store, picked up a small camera. Tiny thing. Fits right near the base of the coat rack. Nothing fancy. Just enough to see who walks through my front door, what they do when they think I'm not looking. I installed it myself. Carefully. Took my time, wiped everything clean, made sure the angle was right. Marked the date and time in a notebook I keep behind the cereal boxes. This isn't paranoia. This is insurance. Once, years ago, I helped expose a guy faking workplace injuries to collect benefits. Hid a camera in a fake fire alarm. Caught him golfing with a perfect swing 2 weeks after claiming his back was shattered. I never forgot that trick. What stings isn't the idea they might steal from me. It's that they believe I wouldn't see it coming. That's what tells you how little they really know you. It was late when I stepped out to the porch. The night was cool, the kind that makes you want to sit with your thoughts a little longer than you should. Across the street, Evelyn's house stood quiet, lights dimmed, their living room glowing faint blue from some late-night show. I watched for a while, just watched. Then I whispered to no one in particular. I'll let them make their move, then I'll make mine. And in the back of my mind, a voice, my own, colder than I expected, said, "The worst betrayals come from the ones you raise." They stopped by again, just like that. Evelyn said they were in the area, though we both know no one's ever just in the area when it's a 15-minute drive off the main highway. I played along, like always. Set the table, roasted a chicken, made mashed potatoes the way Evelyn liked as a girl. I even pulled out the cloth napkins. Figured if they wanted to pretend it was casual, I'd pretend it wasn't. Evelyn brought a bottle of wine. Braxton brought words. Not many, but enough. He filled the spaces between bites with a certain kind of smoothness, each phrase polished like a stone that's been turned in his pocket too many times. The kind that's rehearsed. The room was warm. Dim lights. Ticking clock on the wall just behind Evelyn's head. You notice things like that when you're waiting for something to go wrong. I caught Braxton's eyes drifting, not just at me, but around the room. Corners, cabinets, the hallway. He wasn't looking at the decor. He was measuring. Not that he knew I saw. There's a kind of silence that speaks louder than words, and Braxton brought it with him. Midway through the meal, he asked it, just like tossing a pebble into a still lake, not looking to see how wide the ripples would spread. "What kind of lock does your safe upstairs have, Francis?" I didn't drop my fork, but I sure as hell didn't move it either. It hovered midair, steam curling from the mashed potatoes, my mind already 10 steps ahead. Evelyn's head snapped toward him. "Braxton, that's not appropriate." He laughed, that soft, dismissive chuckle people use when they've said too much and hope a smile will cover it. "I'm just curious. There've been some break-ins around lately. Figured he'd want to be careful." I didn't answer right away, just set my fork down gently. Took a sip of water. Then I smiled. Not a big one, just enough. "I've had that safe longer than I've had you two married. She's never let me down." Braxton nodded. Looked down. And for a flicker, just a flicker, I saw something in his face. A slip. A crack. Like he expected a different answer. Evelyn cleared her throat. Changed the subject. Something about her coworker's new baby. I played along, nodded at the right places, chuckled when I was supposed to, but I never stopped watching him. That question wasn't about curiosity. It was calculation. He knew the safe existed. He wanted to know more. And now I wanted to know how he knew. After they left, I washed the dishes by hand. Slow. Deliberate. Let the warm water run over my fingers while my mind replayed every word from the evening. Like peeling back layers on an onion, each one made me blink harder. He'd asked about the garage last time. Asked about my life insurance policy once too. "Just in case, Bima," he said then. "You know, so we're prepared." Prepared for what? The more I thought, the more I saw it. One question never stands alone. It builds on the last one. They stack up, and if you're not careful, they bury you. If he thinks I'm just a tired old man with no fight left in him, he's gambling wrong. I dried the last dish, turned off the light, and stood for a moment in the kitchen. Let the silence settle. Tomorrow, I'd be checking the safe, and Evelyn. I needed to understand just how far this had gone. On my way to bed, I passed the small drawer by the hallway near my room. Noticed it was open just a crack. That drawer doesn't stay open. I always close it fully, always. I reached out, slid it shut without a sound. "They've already started," I said to no one in particular. I couldn't sleep. Not because I wasn't tired. My bones were heavy from a long day of watching people pretend. But my mind wouldn't rest. The drawer near my bedroom door. Just that one thing cracked open had split the night in two. Everything was quiet, but the silence didn't feel safe. It felt like waiting. I laid there, eyes fixed on the ceiling fan spinning above me, slow and steady like the ticking of a timer. Every creak in the floorboards downstairs had a voice now. I got out of bed without turning on the light, slippers on. Careful steps toward the window. Trees swayed under the moonlight, shadows dancing against the side of the house. I whispered into the dark, "I've seen this movie before." I reached into my nightstand and pulled out a photograph. It was old, creased, edges soft from time. A group photo, me and the crew from '84. Back when I worked audit compliance, back when I thought experience could shield you from being blindsided. There, right in the front row, smiling like a schoolboy at recess, was Mark Connolly, fresh out of college. Clean haircut, tie always just a little too tight. He'd shadowed me for months, eager to learn, always asking questions. Questions I didn't mind at first, then they got too specific. He used to lean over my desk with that same wide-eyed tone Braxton had at dinner. "Hey, Francis, how do we handle duplicate invoice entries? Just curious." "Hey, Francis, what's the vault code change schedule again?" I chalked it up to ambition. Thought he was green, not greedy. One Friday, we wrapped up a late audit. I left first. Monday morning, the vault was empty. $500,000 in bonds gone. I spent 3 days under review. HR, legal, internal affairs. They went through every report I'd filed, every signature. They called my house twice a day. Evelyn was maybe 7 back then, kept asking why I looked so tired. Mark's fingerprints were eventually found on a secondary logbook. He'd made a copy of a key card. Gone by Tuesday, moved out of state before anyone could find him. A man doesn't forget the feel of a knife in his back, especially when it's handed to you with a smile. Braxton's question about the safe, it wasn't curiosity. It was a move in a playbook I'd read cover to cover. And the worst part? Evelyn was sitting right there, didn't see it, didn't feel the air shift like I did. I never told her about Mark. Back then, I figured it wasn't her burden to carry. I wanted her to see the world as fair, honest. Maybe that was my mistake. Hard times create strong men. I gave her easy times, and maybe that made her blind. I sat back on the edge of the bed, photo in hand, guilt pressing into my chest. She trusts him, and I love her. But love doesn't mean letting your child walk into a fire because you were too polite to say the room was burning. I opened the drawer again and pulled out a small leather notebook. It still smelled faintly of cedar. I wrote down the dinner conversation, verbatim. Date, time, Braxton's body language, Evelyn's reaction, the way the air changed when the safe came up. I didn't plan to forget a single detail. Downstairs, I installed a motion camera in the bookshelf facing the hallway. Took my time. Adjusted the angle. Tucked it between 2 photo albums. A camera doesn't sleep. Then I texted Marshall. "Lunch tomorrow?" Just that. No explanation needed. He'd been with the county sheriff's department for 30 years. Retired now. We fish sometimes. Haven't seen him in 6 months. He'll know why I'm calling. You don't win the war by charging first. You win it by knowing exactly when to strike. Around midnight, I locked the back door, double-checked the alarm panel. But as I stepped into the garage to shut the side entrance, something made me pause. Wet footprints, not mine. Too wide for Evelyn. Mud tracked in from the outside path leading from the backyard to the garage door. The air felt thick. My pulse didn't race, it settled. They'd made the first move. I turned off the light and whispered into the dark. Now it's my turn. I pulled into the driveway just past 4. My lunch with Marshall ran longer than expected, mostly because neither of us wanted to say what we were really thinking. We just chewed slowly, talked about trout fishing, and let the real conversation hang in the air between us. He knew something was wrong. He also knew I wasn't ready to say it yet. When I stepped inside the house, it smelled warm, like garlic and rosemary, something bubbling slow on the stove. That wasn't normal. I never cooked at that hour, not unless I had company. "Hey, Dad!" Verity's voice floated in from the kitchen. She came out holding a dish towel, smiling wider than usual. Her energy was a little too cheery. I hung my jacket and tried to act natural. "What's all this?" "Braxton needed help sorting through some of your paperwork," she said, wiping her hands. "Thought we'd surprise you with dinner, too." I glanced toward the study, door half open, Braxton's back barely visible through the gap. He was typing something. Fast. Verity walked up, brushing past me lightly. "Come sit for a minute," she said. We were just about done. I followed her into the living room. Afternoon light was slipping through the curtains, long gold slats cutting across the floorboards. She sat on the couch, legs crossed, trying hard to look casual, but she kept fiddling with a pen she didn't need, Then came the line. "It's no big deal," she said, "but I did sign something. Just for your sake." My ears buzzed. She kept going. "It was about that transfer clause Braxton mentioned. Just a small thing. Nothing official." Transfer clause. I didn't speak. Just blinked slow. Watched the words leave her mouth like smoke from a fire she didn't know she'd started. Then she froze, eyes wide, like a kid realizing too late they'd said too much. "I didn't mean, I mean it's just housekeeping," she added quickly. "It's all just paperwork." I turned toward the hallway just in time to see Braxton step through. "Yes, Vera," he said, catching himself. "I mean, Verity helped me with that." My stomach nodded. He said it like it slipped, but the way it hung there. No apology, no chuckle, just a pause. Verity flinched. That was all I needed. He calls her that in private. He's coached her. Coached her so long he forgot where he was standing. "You ever call my daughter that name again," I said calmly, "I'll make sure you forget what your real one is." Braxton raised his eyebrows, hands up. "Relax, Francis. It was just a slip." I ignored him. Looked straight at Verity. "What kind of contract was it?" She stammered. It's just a financial cleanup thing. Something about consolidation." Braxton cut in. "It's normal estate prep. Nothing binding, just aligning expectations." I leaned back in my chair. "You got a copy of that contract?" They both looked at each other. "I want to see it," I said, slower this time. "Signed, notarized, black and white, not your version of it." Verity shrank slightly. Braxton's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Sure thing. I'll have it printed." I stood. "I'm going to be on the porch. Take your time." I stepped outside, the sun already beginning its slide behind the hills. Cool breeze. My hand rested on the railing, and I watched the sky turn. Behind me, I heard the faint sound of Braxton's voice. Inside, quiet, but not quiet enough. "She's slipping. Move faster." I didn't breathe, didn't turn around. He wasn't talking to her. He was on the phone. They were coordinating, calculated, fast-tracking something behind my back. I whispered to myself. I waited too long. Tomorrow, I'd demand that contract. No more questions, no more playing dumb. They wanted a timeline. Fine, I'd give them one. Mine. They called it a family evening. That's what Evelyn said when she phoned earlier, light and breezy, like she was inviting me to a Sunday potluck. Said Braxton had planned something nice to bring folks together. Even offered to host it at my place since it was more familiar. I knew it wasn't casual. Nothing about Braxton ever is. By the time they arrived, there were a few extra cars parked out front. Strangers, not neighbors I recognized. One had a campaign sticker on the bumper, another wore a blazer that still had a dry cleaning tag. I opened the door, saw Evelyn smiling too wide, Verity trailing behind, and Braxton leading the charge like a man who just bought the deed to the house. "Thought we'd loosen things up," he said, shaking my hand too firmly. "Get some icebreakers going." Dinner was fine. The food wasn't memorable, but that wasn't the point. The room buzzed with chatter, property taxes, county elections, local gossip. But beneath it all, I felt the hum. At a stage being set. I kept quiet, sipping my tea, letting them believe I was still the quiet old man in the corner. But I reminded myself I will not be invisible tonight. Halfway through the meal, Braxton stood with a wineglass raised. "To the man of the hour," he said, smiling like a man holding a leash, "the one who keeps the walls standing, even if sometimes quietly." Laughter. A few glances. I looked around the room, faces that didn't know me, laughing like they did. He wasn't done. "And let's not forget the new wing we added last year," he continued. "I mean, we built it, but I sure hope Dad remembers. It was quite the project." That landed like a brick. He wasn't honoring me. He was laying claim. Evelyn's smile faded. Verity looked down at her plate. I didn't flinch. I let my fork rest gently on the napkin and nodded once. But inside, something cracked. Not from what he said, but from who he said it to. A man's home isn't just wood and nails. It's memory. History. And Braxton had just pissed on mine. Later, after the guests started leaving, Adeline pulled me aside in the hallway. Francis, she said, soft but firm, you need to protect yourself. She wasn't smiling. She was dead serious. What he's doing, Verhison, the toast, the paperwork, the pressure on Verity, it's reckless, possibly unlawful. I said nothing. I can file a cease and desist, she offered. Even challenge any documents that weren't properly disclosed or signed, but you need to be ready for what that means. I nodded, slowly. She added, you don't fight this in anger, Francis. You fight it with receipts. And just like that, I realized the law wasn't a burden. It was a tool. If I used it right, it could be my shield. After they left, I retreated to my study, closed the door, sat in my old leather chair. I let the night sit with me, let the silence stretch until it stopped buzzing in my ears. Then I opened the drawer, pulled out my notebook, and started writing. Every word, every name, every comment Braxton had made in the past week, dated, noted, cross-referenced with the footage I'd already saved. He wanted a battle. I've fought before. The only reason I'd ever chosen silence was to keep the family intact. But tonight, I felt no guilt in preparing for war. They thought I was some leftover from another era, a relic. But even relics cast shadows, and mine was long. I jotted one last note. Demand full review of all documents, with a notary, present, recorded. Then I heard it. Braxton's voice, low and hurried, coming from the hallway. Evelyn, we need that document signed tonight. My body went still. The door to my study was cracked open just enough. His shadow moved across the light strip on the floor, closer. I didn't move, didn't blink. I slid my notebook under my palm, braced it. He's coming for it. Tonight. Something about the air that evening felt tighter, still, but not peaceful. The lights in the neighbors' homes went out earlier than usual. The street outside lay hushed, not a car rolling by, not even the usual porch light flickers. It was the kind of silence that doesn't soothe, it warns. I walked the perimeter of the house like I used to check the fence line back when we had coyotes circling. Locks, set. Camera feed, clean. The motion sensor behind the coat rack blinked once, steady, armed. In the study, I opened the black notebook, pages nearly full now. Each entry timed, cataloged. Braxton's slips, his glances, Verity's nervous fidgets, patterns were forming. I paused only when the phone rang. Marisol. Her voice was steady but clipped. Found the backup flash drive. From your porch light camera. I didn't tell you before. I was worried he'd get to it. I've got everything. I didn't know whether to feel grateful or sick. Marisol, I said, tonight, just stay alert. She hesitated. You too. I hung up, staring out the darkened window. I wasn't waiting for them anymore. I was watching. Tonight, I stopped being the hunted. They arrived under pretense. Evelyn asking if she could drop off a few papers. Braxton tagging along, of course, playing polite like a man pretending not to own the place. As we stood in the living room, Evelyn suddenly remembered something. Oh, I think I left the insurance file upstairs, she said, glancing at Braxton. Could you check, honey? He was already halfway down the hallway before I could speak. My pulse kicked up. Quietly, I moved into the corridor. Slow steps, soft floorboards. The camera in the hallway was already recording. I watched the flicker of shadow pass over the beam from the door. Braxton was in my room. He didn't hesitate. I saw him drop to his knee, twist the knob on the hidden safe, hands moving like he'd done it before. He didn't fumble. That told me everything. Then, Verity's voice from upstairs. A sharp yelp, not quite a scream, but loud enough to freeze him mid-movement. He jolted, cursed under his breath, and bolted out of the room just as I ducked back around the corner. I waited, breath slow, counted 10, then stepped inside. The safe door was ajar. Not open, but tampered. Smudge prints on the handle. I didn't feel fear. I felt something colder. Control. 30 minutes later, Marisol arrived. No warning. Just walked in, her coat still buttoned, eyes scanning the house. I didn't want to call, she said, pulling an envelope from her bag. Too risky. Inside was the flash drive. She handed me her phone as well, footage already queued. I watched. A timestamp from last week. Braxton outside my back door. Another clip. Him stepping into the hall. His voice. He won't remember this anyway. I shut the phone off. That sound. His voice on tape. It was like a switch flipped. Every doubt, every crack in my certainty sealed itself. I had what I needed. I wish I had this years ago, I said, barely more than a whisper. Marisol looked at me, nodded. But you have it now. She left quietly. I sat down at the desk, typed a short email to Evelyn and Braxton requesting full explanation of all recent legal documents. No threats, just facts, professional tone. Then, with the envelope in hand, I walked out to Evelyn, alone in the kitchen. I laid the envelope on the counter. Take your time, I said, but read everything in there. Then tell me if I'm imagining things. She didn't touch it, just stared at me. I didn't know, she said. I nodded. I believe that, but you know now. And that was enough. The rest of the evening I played it normal, joked with Verity, asked Braxton how the car's been running, the usual Sunday small talk. But inside I was armor-plated. They still thought the game was in their hands. But I wasn't just a piece on the board anymore. That night I turned in early, let the house fall quiet again. But just before I drifted off, the phone buzzed. Motion sensor triggered. I got up, moved through the hallway. No voices, no steps. Just a single chair from the dining table, tipped over on its side. I stared at it for a long second. Then I said under my breath, they were here. They know I know. I set up the living room like I was arranging evidence. The backup folder, flash drive, transcripts, metadata printouts, rested on the coffee table, barely hidden beneath a stack of magazines. I touched nothing, just let it sit there in plain view. When Evelyn and Braxton arrived, the air felt tight. Polite smiles, small talk, forced calm, people walking on carbon paper. Braxton tried to soften the mood. We've always tried to lighten Dad's burdens, he said, voice casual, eyes flicking toward my gaze. Evelyn nodded. Guests murmured agreement. I raised my glass slowly. Thank you for caring so much about my burdens, I replied, soft. The silence hit like a weight. Conversations paused. He smiled awkwardly. The veneer cracked. Then Verity fumbled. Her phone lit up. She looked down. Hidden cam 0423 MP4. A thumbnail. Faces froze. Braxton's face paled. She tried to swipe it closed. No, wait, she stuttered. I cleared my throat. That folder you peeked at. I gave a copy to Adeline last week. The room went still. Guests' eyes flicked between Evelyn, Verity, Braxton. I held the silence. I let it stretch. Braxton's lip curled. He jumped in. This is fake. Tampered. You're lying. Evelyn gasped. Some guests murmured confusion. I didn't react immediately. I held up the backup drive. You didn't count on Marisol, I said, nodding to empty air. Or your own carelessness. I played a clip. Him opening my safe door. The screen glowed. Gasps rose. Faces shifted. Betrayal, shock, regret. I added quietly, you lost your advantage the moment you walked through my door. Braxton slammed the table and bolted. Chairs scraped. The door behind him slammed. Evelyn stood frozen, tears forming, fear in her eyes. The guests scattered, whispering. I remained where I was, hands steady, heart calm, watching them leave the stage I built. He's gone, but he won't stay away for long. The invitations went out under the name of celebration, new beginnings, family unity, a toast to the next chapter. That's what the cards said. A little wine, some catered bites, and a room full of faces too polite to admit they were only there to stay informed. My living room hadn't seen that many people in years, yet every step I took felt grounded. This wasn't just an evening, it was a setup. A quiet, calculated reckoning dressed up in small talk and smiles. Braxton arrived late, of course. Walked in like a groom to his own reception, all charm and confidence. Evelyn followed closely, glued to his side. He shook hands, clapped backs, offered lines like, Dad and I have been working on something big, and it's time our family moves forward. I nodded along, matching his tone. But inside I watched. The hard drive was already connected to the TV behind me, just waiting. Glasses clinked. Guests circled the dining table. Someone proposed a toast. To me, to family, to a new legacy. Braxton took center stage with practiced ease. I'm proud to have helped steer the ship while Dad took some much-needed rest. He raised his glass. To guidance, to family trust. I let him have that moment. Just one more lie before the truth swallowed him whole. I raised my own glass, then set it down. Before we toast, I said, voice steady, there's something I think everyone should see. A few heads tilted. I picked up the remote and hit play. The room dimmed. On the screen, Braxton appeared, crouching at my safe, eyes scanning, hands moving with certainty. He rifled through drawers, pocketed papers. There was no sound, only the images. Time-stamped. Clear. Gasps rose. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. A neighbor whispered, "Is that his son?" Braxton turned pale, his eyes darting toward the TV, then to me. That's fake," he snapped. "You think this proves something?" "You're playing games with my life." "Really?" I said, stepping forward. "Seems pretty straightforward to me." He flailed. "You've been manipulating everyone. This is paranoia. That footage is edited. You're making a fool of me." His voice cracked. He pointed to the screen. "You can't just put a video up and call it truth." I didn't argue. I didn't have to. I turned toward the crowd. "Adelaine," I said. She stepped out from the hallway, holding her briefcase like a sword. Calm, direct. "This is the original file. The metadata is untouched. Forensic timestamps align with surveillance logs. I verified the contents myself as your family attorney." She clicked through her tablet. "This isn't an isolated incident. We've reviewed Braxton's edits to prior contracts. This is part of a pattern." Her voice never rose, but it didn't have to. The room fell into a hush so thick I could hear Evelyn's quiet sob. Guests shifted, eyes downcast, hands folded. Braxton's face twisted. "You all think this is real. You're all siding with—" He stopped mid-sentence, swallowing his own bitterness. Adelaine stared him down. "This isn't about sides. This is about the truth, and you brought this on yourself." I stood quietly watching. "Truth isn't loud," I murmured. "It's undeniable." That's when the lights cut out. Total black. People gasped. The screen froze. Braxton's hand mid-reach in the safe. For a moment, nothing moved. No one breathed. Then the lights flickered back. Bright, harsh. Braxton was gone. He didn't walk out a man. He disappeared as a shadow, and I stood there, heart pounding steady in my chest. He walked out, but he didn't win. I woke before the sun. The house was silent. Too silent, in a way that reminded me of the morning after a storm. You walk out expecting trees down, fences snapped, debris in the yard, but instead, everything stands, just soaked, heavy. I wrapped my hands around a mug of black coffee and stepped out to the porch. It was still damp from the night before. The swing creaked slightly when I sat. Not from weight, just memory. The celebration, the revelation, the fallout. All of it echoed in the emptiness left behind. Evelyn hadn't come home. I didn't expect her to. And I didn't chase her either. I stared past the fence into the trees lining the edge of my property. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. My mind drifted, not aimless but resolved. Sometimes the win doesn't come wrapped in applause or apologies. Sometimes it's simply not letting someone ruin who you are. That's the real victory, when their damage can't stick. I met with Adelaine late morning. No drama, no drawn-out speeches, just clear final documents. She slid the power of attorney revocation across the table. "It's done," she said. I signed it without hesitation. "There's no need for charges?" she asked gently. "No, but I want him locked out legally, permanently. Let the law do what my fists never needed to." She nodded, then hesitated. "Evelyn called. Left a message." I waited. She said, "She's confused." Didn't say sorry. I blinked slow. That tracks. It didn't sting like it used to. I wasn't bitter. I just wasn't surprised anymore. After she left, I wandered out back and scrubbed down the old porch swing. The paint had chipped from years of ignoring it. I fixed the bolts. Later that day, I painted the side fence, something I hadn't touched since the grandkids were toddlers. I took a walk to the school down the street. Verity had a little music show, flutes, tambourines, lots of chaos and pride. I sat in the back near the exit, watching her scan the room and light up when she saw me. I waved, and for the first time in a long while, I felt fully present, not fractured between the past and what-ifs. Later that week, I hosted Adelaine and her fiancé for dinner, just the three of us. We talked more about life than law, laughed at things that didn't require defensiveness or pretense. The old family table, once a war zone, now felt like a place of rest. Being alone doesn't mean lonely. It means I'm finally standing where no one else can shake me. I make my own plans, set my own terms. I started journaling everything. Not to publish, not for some grand audience, just in case one day someone in this family, someone lost or tired or betrayed, wants to understand how to stay upright when the ground crumbles. I wrote, "Your dignity is the only inheritance you can control. Give that to yourself first. And maybe that's enough." I stood in the living room just before sunset, ready to lock up. As I passed the entryway, I glanced at the security monitor. Just habit, really, one new alert. A figure stood near the edge of the driveway, still, unmoving, just watching. I didn't step outside. I didn't reach for the phone. I didn't need to. Some people learn, and some people just circle back for more. The light from the porch dimmed. I closed the door.